If you look at what these legacy applications are doing, they're doing massive transaction processing, but they're doing it based upon rules. The world soon realized that it would be better off if I wasn't writing code. AI is proving to be really good at getting into these older applications and revealing the business processes and business logic that's embedded in there and have been built in there for decades.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Insurance Distribution Podcast. I'm here today with Paul Holland, CTO of Astadia. Paul, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Martin, and thanks for having me on. I'm doing okay, thanks.
You mentioned that you were dialing in from Florida, but you're originally from the UK. I would love to understand your journey and particularly how you ended up working in the insurance industry and becoming the CTO of Astadia. So maybe you can connect both parts to start with.
Sure, absolutely. Well, yeah, take a look at me. I'm not a young spring chicken, so it could be quite a long story. So I probably don't want to go into too much detail. But my career in IT, interestingly enough, has really been focused on application modernization for over 40 years now. I hate saying that, but it's been a long time. Back in the 80s, I started out as a developer, like most people, right? But the world soon realized that it would be better off if I wasn't writing code. That was something that happened after a few years. But I have really, since the mid-80s, been involved in helping people migrate, improve applications. Now, of course, in the 1980s, people weren't talking about modernization, and they certainly weren't talking about legacy applications. But things were still happening in IT that caused people to have to deal with really the same issues that they're dealing with today in many ways. Back then, and this will make your audience laugh a little bit, but the dilemma was, how do you get off mini computers to this newfangled thing called Unix? In fact, when I started, it wasn't even Unix. We were moving people to small systems running Xenix. And how do I unlock the data that's associated with these applications? And how do I keep pace with what is happening in terms of IT and the skills available in IT to make my applications relevant to the current business needs? And that really hasn't changed. So I started that process back many years ago, back around about the turn of the century or just after the Y2K problem. I really started to focus in on large-scale mainframe legacy workloads and helping organizations modernize and migrate away from those legacy environments. And I've been doing that really ever since. I've worked for pretty much all the major players in this space. In fact, before joining Astadia, I was a consultant at IBM, a partner in IBM Consulting, focused on mainframe modernization within the financial services sector. And that, among other things, that got me involved in looking at this problem through the lens of insurance companies as well and carriers.
Excellent. So let's put it like long story short, what is the role of Astadia when talking about insurance and particularly insurance distribution, which is kind of the focus of the show? How would you be able to summarize Astadia's role within this sum?
Well, Astadia is very much focused in a horizontal way, in a general way, on the issue of legacy application modernization. And what does that mean today? A lot of that actually means repurposing and refactoring and modernizing legacy applications, typically running on large IBM Z series, to more often than not today to the cloud. Either private cloud or indeed public cloud. And what we've seen is that this is a very relevant and somewhat hot topic for insurance carriers today. Those carriers that have, there's obviously a lot of players in the market with different lineage of applications, but the carriers that really have those big, older policy admin claims processing systems that were developed literally decades ago, running on older technologies, are now really getting to grips with changing that, with moving from that status quo, and that's something that Astadia can help very much with, and we're engaged with several players in that space, helping modernize and migrate those applications.
Gotcha. So, what are the key reasons why insurance carriers want to move from a legacy system to a modern, let's say, cloud environment? On the one hand, what are the reasons that usually they are interested in moving it? But then on the other hand, what are the usual restrictions to do this sooner? Because naturally, I would say there's a lot of opportunity to moving to cloud, but then there's a lot of also operational costs behind doing that. So I'd like to see both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah. So I think, why, the why and why now is quite interesting actually. Because if you look at just even the market broadly around legacy applications, mainframe applications, one of the big drivers over the years, and I'm talking about maybe the last 20 years, has been the cost of the infrastructure, the cost of the compute platform, right? Mainframes are expensive. Running large transaction processing applications on a mainframe have the benefit of it's a very good platform to do that kind of work. Very scalable, very resilient, very important factors for most insurance carriers. But it is expensive, and it's kind of out of kilter with the way the industry now carries that expense or goes about covering that expense. So a lot of the cost of these older environments are actually driven partly by the infrastructure, but actually also driven by the software and the environment that you're running there, and the way that is licensed. It's licensed based on peak consumption, not scaled up and down on an as-needed basis. It's licensed on terms, so there's a consistent need for renewing those licenses. So you're paying for your maximum usage, and you're paying over and over again for a lot of the software and environment that you're running on there. So economically, it's a hard environment. It's an expensive environment for organizations to live with these days. But as time's gone by, other factors are really impacting these legacy environments, these legacy applications as well. And one is a lot of people who built these applications or even are maintaining these applications today look like me. They're old. And maybe some of them are even older than me. I can tell you horror stories where I know people who have had to be called back from retirement in their late 70s or even their early 80s because nobody knew how these applications were actually working. So there's that going on. There's that talent skills issue. And a lot of that, by the way, gets characterized as knowing the technology, because obviously a lot of these applications are written in some pretty old technologies. COBOL is the obvious one, but you'd be amazed how much assembler is out there, PL1, and other very obscure legacy programming languages. So a lot of it is about having the skills around mainframe operations and environments as well. But what often gets overlooked is it's also having the knowledge of how these applications work, what's actually going on inside the applications. So skills and talent availability is very much a driver in the industry now. But I think the one that is probably becoming more dominant is agility. The reality is these applications in many, many cases have been custom built by carriers. They are very fit for purpose, right? They're still running the business incredibly well, but they've existed for literally decades. And over that time, different development groups have come in, managed those applications, made changes to them, governance requirements, regulatory requirements come along, additional changes get made, additional changes. And of course, inevitably what that does is pile up the technical debt inside those applications. And I think, given the amount of time these apps have been in place, given the underlying technologies they're built in, and given the demands of the businesses today to be faster and more reaction to the market, what happens is these applications become increasingly brittle. So they're hard to change, and when you change them, it's easier to break them. And that, I think, is now becoming a real drag for organizations, and I think is a big driver that we're seeing now.
What signals have you seen on the why now? Because this could be like an ongoing problem that you start like accumulating under the carpet and then eventually it would pop up. But the business of an insurance carrier is not to rebuild their legacy system, it's just to operate. What are the signals that you see like, okay, now it's a good time. I have not only the idea, but the resources and the incentives aligned to make this happen?
Well, okay, so why now? It could be quite a long answer to this. So one of the interesting things about the insurance market is, by definition, insurance carriers are risk adverse, right? That's their job, right? Avoid risk. And secondly, I think in terms of IT, I mean, like you were making the point there, I think, Martin, insurance companies are not IT companies, right? They've got a business, they're running their business. So very often what I see in insurance is, look, if it ain't broke, I'm not going to fix it. So I feel like we have seen over the years this sort of, look, things are running pretty well. It may cost me a bit of money, but you know what? It works. And I'm risk adverse, so I want to stick with what works, and I don't want to go and fix something that isn't really broken. I don't need to be making that level of investment. So I think that's been the drag on change. Now, the why now, I think, is interesting. What's coming in to cause insurers to take a look at this time? Well, funnily enough, even though I talked about economics, the commercial aspects of running these mainframe applications as being perhaps something that's been out there for a while, and other factors have come in. One of the things that's definitely driving people to change at the moment is a lot of the vendors who license software on the mainframe that is required to run these applications, and this could be proprietary database software, it could be operational utilities on the mainframes. What we're seeing is a lot of those vendors are adopting quite predatory licensing approaches now. And I won't name names on this podcast, but let me just put it out there as a general statement that a lot of organizations, as they come up to the renewal of some of these licensed products on their mainframes, are getting hit with 2 times, 3 times, even 4 times increases in the cost of their licensing. Now one of the things about that, we're not talking about a few $1,000s, we're literally talking about millions. And that sort of increase gets the notice of the CFO, for sure, outside of IT, right? The CIO sees it, but the CFO sees it. And I can tell you, CEOs are becoming aware of some of these predatory licensing practices and are just mandated, get me off that platform. I am not going to be held hostage by these vendors in this way. So it's a moment in time, but it's interesting. It's a big factor. But I think there's something else, and it's more strategic, right? I think this idea of carriers wanting to be more agile, wanting to be more able to react to the markets, but also generate new products for the markets in very short cycles, is forcing them to take a look at these older applications for their policy management and look at ways of making improvements. Now, we've seen one of the ways that organizations, carriers are doing that is looking out to modern policy admin, claims management platforms that they can replace their legacy applications with. And there's certainly a trend in doing that. But I think a lot of organizations also recognize that it's not one nor the other. In some cases, there is a great deal of IP that is really valuable and gives them uniqueness in the way they manage their business, embedded in those legacy applications that they want to preserve and move forward. And I think there's also an idea that while new platforms can be a way forward, and they are adopting new platforms, it isn't the case that you're just going to throw out everything else because you've moved to that or you're in the process of moving to that new platform. And then I think the last thing that's impacting the market is AI, right? AI is, I think there's two angles to this, right? On the one hand, AI is being adopted by carriers in the way they want to optimize their business and improve the value of their business and the way they bring value to their customers. But also, on the other hand, AI is seen as a bit of an X factor now on the feasibility and the opportunity to modernize these legacy applications as well. So it's a bit of a perfect storm going on at the moment around this.
No, that's an excellent angle. To the next question that I wanted to bring actually was about AI. Of course, we are in the technology ecosystem. We see AI like everywhere. Probably some of the applications are more effective than others, but there's certainly interest around this, and insurance, particular distribution, it's a place where there's a lot of use cases going on. I was actually going to ask this capacity that you mentioned of interacting. Okay, let's bring a new claims solution to react faster than we currently do, but then let's keep our mainframe operating at the same time. Have you seen AI building a bridge in this intersection between the two of them by the actual AI agents interacting with the system, with the mainframe system, because they can learn how to navigate complex systems and providing an easier interface to the user or the customer, so that this way both can keep relevant in the day-to-day and you do not need to substitute it right away. Have you seen this actually in practice?
Well, let me just say, we're living in a very interesting time, Martin, and I think it's fair to say no matter what the question is, the answer is always AI at the moment, right? AI can do absolutely everything. So that's something that I feel like I'm having to deal with as I interact with my customers. Because there's a lot to that, but there's also a degree of reality that you've got to introduce. Yeah, I think one of the things that's really intriguing, and we're seeing where AI really adds significant value, and it's sort of directed towards what you're saying, but I think there's more to it than just that interface integration kind of capability. I said right back at the beginning, one of the challenges that a lot of organizations are facing, and in insurance, the insurance is a rules-driven business. If you look at what these legacy applications are doing, they're doing massive transaction processing, but they're doing it based upon rules. And those rules are variable because things change state by state, depending on the type of line of business that you're running, but typically change state by state. And they change over time, right? Regulators, governance change those rules as well over time. So inherent in these legacy applications is a lot of business logic, a lot of rules, right? And one of the, and it's wrapped up in complex, old programming code, right? And so it's no structure to it. It's all over the place. If it's a Wednesday and it's raining, do this. If it's and it's all embedded in these monolithic, highly integrated balls of spaghetti, as I like to call them. And I often say we're in the business of taking that spaghetti, firstly turning it into lasagna, so everything is nicely layered, and then taking that lasagna into very well nicely cut out pieces of ravioli with nice fillings inside, right? That's the modernization journey, and that's where AI is really having an impact, and it's having an impact initially, across that whole journey, but initially by enabling organizations to truly understand what these applications do, Because before you even think about what are my integration points, how can I build out this hybrid, or even how do I get to a new package platform, in order to understand what your gap analysis might be, in order to understand what that journey needs to look like, you really need to understand what your current applications do. And AI is proving to be really good at getting into these older applications and revealing the business processes and business logic that's embedded in there and have been built in there for decades. So we see that, and that's a great starting platform, right? That starts to enable what you were talking about, which is, first of all, how do I move to a new platform? And if I want to have this hybrid world, this fit for purpose, multi-platform world, and join that all together, then what are the touch points? What processing do I want to do? Where all of that starts to become feasible once you understand your current environment to that level.
In other words, AI will let you eat ravioli while you're getting spaghetti at the same time. That's kind of a way to summarize it.
I guess AI will give you that smorgasbord of pasta, right? You can start to eat what you want based on having that understanding. Yeah.
Excellent. Maybe to start rounding up the conversation, I would love for CTOs, CIOs that are actually in this journey of starting to migrate their legacy system step by step. What would be practical steps that you would suggest for them to start moving towards modernization without disrupting the business, which in the end is what they are risk averse about, right?
Well, look, I always feel, if you look at anyone who goes to climb Mount Everest or other big mountains, right? The smart people get a guide. They get someone who knows their way up that mountain, knows the possible problems they're going to face and how to work around that. So one thing I would advocate for anybody, any CIO, CEO, CFO who's considering tackling this problem, is these are the type of programs, projects that frankly IT organizations don't typically, the type of transformation project that IT organizations typically don't have big reserves of expertise and experience in-house. So I would always advocate looking at bringing in specialists, bringing in people, I often say, if you wanted to get heart surgery, you wouldn't go and just get your local primary physician to do it for you, right? You want a heart specialist. So that's where I feel a lot of companies can benefit. Bring in expertise early on, because there's a lot of decision making that has to be made. We call it sort of disposition analysis. Do you want to take it to a modern platform, an external third-party platform? Do you want to modernize what you've got? And based on that sort of desire, what is the right roadmap of modernization you want to take? And it will probably be a mix. One of the things we see in insurance carriers a lot is closed books of business. Either they're moving to a new platform, they're taking policies across, but they're not going to migrate every policy. They're going to have some policies that either are a closed book of business or they want to keep in a sort of static historic state. You don't want to be running closed books of business on the most expensive compute platform you can, right? Let's move those sort of things out to a low cost cloud base. So different strategies for different things, and I think getting guidance on that can be a big help. And then the other thing is look for organizations that can bring a degree of automation, optimization, and scalability to the transformation process. I always say this is, it's the 3 Ps, right? It's products. It's actually having the technology that can accelerate these kind of transformations, and then it's process and people. And I think you want to bring in organizations that can offer all three.
Excellent. So we got into the main challenges behind moving from a legacy system to a modern one. What are the reasons behind it? What's kind of the step-by-step approach that you suggest? And then now bringing practical advice to the CEO and CDOs. So to end up, we wanted to get to know Paul a little bit more, not only on the professional side, but on the personal side. And we have 3 very specific questions that you can answer with a small reply or provide some context. If that sounds good to you, it's a small ping pong. Would that work?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Excellent. So if you were to recommend a book, which book would you recommend?
Oh, wow. That's hitting me sideways. You know, I think I would go for the complete works of Shakespeare.
Yeah, to the classics. That's great. If you were to, and maybe the answer is William Shakespeare, but if you were to have dinner with someone dead or alive that you could pick, who would you choose?
All right, that would have to be Winston Churchill.
Okay.
You know, I often say great people are often very flawed, and he was very flawed. But I'd love to have dinner, and he enjoyed a good dinner. So
Yeah, that would be a fun dinner, absolutely. And finally, which was the musical band of your life, if you wanted to bring only one band or song,
now you're
whatever you
asking
pick?
me. Well, I have very eclectic musical taste. Good question, by the way. So I like everything from classical to jazz to rock to pop. My kids will tell you I'm the biggest Ed Sheeran fan in the world. But I think the guy that really impacted me the most musically is David Bowie.
Okay,
I would David Bowie. Yeah.
excellent. Good way to get to know you. So it's everything British, which I guess that makes sense.
Completely subconscious, but very good
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
Yeah, I stuck with
makes
my
sense.
home nation there. Yeah.
Paul, it was great meeting you. Thanks a lot for sharing
Thank
your
you.
insights, and I hope the audience also enjoyed the episode. So looking forward to keeping in touch, and of course to keep modernizing the insurance industry, which is a very relevant job, not only for the companies but also for the
There's
customers.
there's a lot to do out there, Martin. So let's do it. Thank you for having me on.